Hi, my dragons. Welcome to learning video number 3. This is the second time I'm recording this. As you can see, it's nighttime now because I recorded it during the daytime and I don't know where it went. It just went somewhere. So anyway, I'm going to do recording number 3, part 3 again. So we left off when we were talking about schedules for reinforcement, and basically there are two types, partial and continuous. So in continuous reinforcement, something happens in a predictable way. I've been doing this all day, so I'm tired. Predictable way every time. After every correct response, you get a reinforcement. Okay, it's like your weekly paycheck. You get a weekly paycheck every Friday. You know it's coming, and money is a reinforcer. Okay, a partial reinforcement. It's reinforced after some, but not all correct responses. Okay, and this makes it really difficult to extinction. So this would be like if you do piecework. So you get paid only for, every X number that you make. So you may not get it every Friday, but you'll get it after so many items are done, whatever your contract is for the piecemeal. So that would be an example of partial reinforcement. There's also interval schedules and ratio schedules. An interval schedule means it's coming by time, okay? So a fixed interval schedule that a certain amount of time must pass before the reinforcement becomes possible. And it's always the same. So it's always, 1 week, how many? 40 hours. So after 40-hour work week, then you get your paycheck, okay? So it's a fixed schedule. A variable schedule is that the interval of time must pass before reinforcement becomes possible, and it's different for each event or each trial. So this is if you're not working a job that is being paid for every 40 hours. Maybe you're getting a job that's per event or per thing that you do, like if you're a caterer or something like that. It's not per every 40 hours work, it's per event or something like that. So that's variable ratio for that kind of thing. Variable interview. A fixed ratio reinforcement is the number of reinforcement, okay? The number of responses required, and the variable ratio is the schedule of reinforcement, where the number of responses required for reinforcement is different each time. So interval is time and ratio is number of responses. On figure 35, slide 35, you can see how the learning curve's different between variable and ratio and interval schedules of reinforcement. So read up on that one. It's pretty cool. And then punishment. So punishment is very important for operant or instrumental conditioning. Punishment is any event or object that, when following response, makes that response less likely to happen. Okay, that's what the textbook definition is. So punishment by application, it just means that you get an addition of something that is unpleasant. So a spanking would be an addition of something that's unpleasant. Punishment by removal would be you remove something that you have or that you like, and it's pleasurable to you. So you're no longer experiencing that pleasurable thing that you have. So an example of this would be, it's a story. I remember a time when my family and I went camping, and my sister didn't ask my niece to do something. And my niece was busy reading the last Harry Potter book. So, of course, she didn't want to do what her mother was asking her. And so my sister took the book away from her and said, "You'll get it back after you do what I asked you to do." So that would be an example of punishment by removal. I did not agree with that, of course, because, Harry Potter is more important. So, but it worked. I mean, she got her thing done really quickly because she had to get her Harry Potter book read. Okay. So on slide 37, there's a good, contrast of reinforcement by addition and punishment by addition and punishment by something unpleasant, removal. Okay, so look that over. That would make a nice little essay question. You might think of something, that you have experienced that would be an example of that. Now, severe punishment. It may cause the person, if the person or animal thinks that the punishment is too severe, it may cause them to avoid the person who's giving the punishment than the punishment or behavior itself. So in that case that I was telling you about with my sister, my niece might have said, you know what, I hate my mom. You know, she's worse than the punishment. She didn't, but I'm just saying that that would have been an example of this, okay? And this encourages lying. You know, like she could have said, well, I already did it, you know, when clearly she hadn't. And of course that makes fear and anxiety because, of course, you know, she could have checked up on her. So an example of that in the current day would be like, let's say, not Tiffin University, any university, that would send a student home if they tested positive for COVID, you know, and the student gets to campus and they see their friends and they're having a good time and they're in the dorm and parents not there to tell them what they should or shouldn't do. So they want to stay at campus. But if they know that they tell the truth, that, you know, they've tested positive for COVID or that they have symptoms that now they have to go get tested, you know, they might downplay it and say, you know, I feel fine, there's no problem. Not me, I didn't test positive for COVID. And so they might lie on, you know, whether or not they actually feel sick. I'm not saying that happens at Tiffin University because we're all honest here at Tiffin University. We would never lie on our daily screenings. But some other university that is less honest than us, that might be something that would be going on. And that would be an example of the role of punishment in operant conditioning. So negative reinforcement versus punishment by removal, that would be a good thing for you to consider, okay? And that would be slide 39. They have a very nice little example. So example of negative reinforcement, okay, you stop at a red light so that you don't get into a car accident, that 18-wheeler doesn't come, it goes by, you're stopped, everything's cool. You don't run the stop sign and then 18-wheeler smashes into you and kills you. See, that would be a negative consequence. Fastening your safety belt, is also because the thing is beeping at you to do it, so you want it to stop. So that's another negative reinforcement. And obeying a parent who counts to 3, 1, 2, 3. You know how parents do that. That's an example as well. Punishment by removal is losing your driving privileges. That's what they do. You know, if you're DUI or driving under the influence of any kind of drug, you can, you know, just lose your license or driving privileges, and that's terrible. Or having to pay money because you're speeding. That would be, you know, now you have to pay money. That's punishment by removal, removing your money. Or being grounded, which would be losing your freedom. Okay, so those are all really good examples. That's slide 39. So punishment, how punishment works in operant conditioning. So the first thing that you have to realize is that punishment, in order for it to work, is it's very important that it has temporal contiguity. Contiguous in time, closely associated with time. So the punishment should immediately follow that behavior that it wants to punish, okay? So like we had a situation in Tiffin when we didn't have a facility, a jail, to hold people. It was always overcrowded and we had to ship people to Bowling Green and different places. And so we were in the situation where someone would violate a law and they would say, okay, you're sentenced, you're guilty, and you know, next year you'll be serving time. See, those things aren't contiguous in time. So you have to get sentenced and go to jail for what you did in order for that punishment to be effective. So now we have a new jail and everything's contiguous in time. So punishment should be consistent. It should be continuous and contiguous in time. And it should be with the behavior that is wrong, okay, in order for it to work. So it would be like, you know, you punish your dog, your dog does something wrong, and you want the behavior to stop. You should do it, you know, close to when the dog does it. It wouldn't make any sense to the dog if the dog did something you don't want it to do, like whatever it is, and then, you know, 2 hours later you're punishing it. The dog's not going to understand what it did and why it's getting punished, okay? The same thing with a human being. So other things that operant conditioning can work on, to discriminate any stimulus, such as a stop sign. You see a stop sign and you know you should stop. You know the difference between stop and yield, and the punishment that comes with it for not doing that. Operant conditioning. You have to do a certain cue to obtain a reinforcement, whether positive or negative. That's what you have to do. Extinction occurs if that response is not reinforced. So once you stop rewarding people or punishing people, that behavior will continue. I remember someone telling me it was a teacher that was going on strike and said, look, if I lose my job, if you stop paying me anyway, I stop showing up. Okay. And that's exactly what he was talking about, extinction. Okay. So one example, if a kid throws a temper tantrum, you should just ignore it, because eventually the kid will, get tired of throwing a temper tantrum. And that's one way of not rewarding their behavior. So I often talk in criminal justice where, sometimes people commit crimes and they continue to commit crimes because the punishment isn't harsh enough, or it isn't contiguous in time, or they're not associating their bad behavior with a negative. So when people continue doing the crime, I say that that's like rewarding their bad behavior. Okay, so if you do something like that, and the reason why people continue and recidivate is because their bad behavior has been rewarded. Okay, so if you work in a juvenile facility, they'll say, look, I was selling drugs and I make more money than anybody who works here. Okay, yes, but I'm going home for dinner. Okay, so your behavior is not rewarded, even though you think you're making more money. Making more money is not equivalent to having freedom. So that's rewarding bad behavior applied. Okay, so that's operant conditioning and punishment. So also, responses can be generalized to stimuli that are only similar but not identical. So so if you have a behavior that you're looking at the original stimulus, if it's similar enough, they should respond in the same way, but not identical. Okay, so that's really interesting. So you might get a different response if something is similar enough to the original thing that you're doing to correct behavior. Spontaneous recovery is when, it also occurs in operant conditioning. You thought the rewards were extinguished, or the behavior was extinguished, and all of a sudden it comes back. Okay, so that would be spontaneous recovery. The other thing that is very interesting are some applications of operant conditioning. I know in the book and in the PowerPoints it says that Skinner was the father of behaviorism, but technically that's not correct. Watson was the father of behaviorism. B.F. Skinner was the father of behavior therapy and behavior modification. So what Skinner did was he applied behaviorism and behavior therapy techniques to a therapeutic end to modify behavior. And so he came up with a whole bunch of them, and two of them were shaping and successive approximation. Shaping is when you have a behavior goal that you have in mind, and you gradually shape the responses that you want toward a goal. This is also true with successive approximation, except in successive approximation, you're breaking those behaviors up into little bits. So let's take Shamu, the killer whale at SeaWorld, and you want him to have a goal of jumping through a hoop, okay? So what you do is you submerge a hoop into the whale's tank, and the whale is swimming around the tank, and he swims by the hoop, and he may touch it. And anytime that whale gets close to the hoop, you give him a reward. And he's like, whoa, I got a reward when I was next to the hoop, so I'm going to swim next to the hoop again. And you give him a reward again. Then he will touch the hoop, you give him more reward. But ultimately, he will swim through the hoop under the water. And when he does that, you give him a bigger reward. He's like, oh, well, look at that. I went through the hoop. I got a big reward. So gradually what you'll do is you want him to jump through that hoop, and you want that hoop to be up high, and you want him to leap up out of the water and jump through the hoop. So what you're gradually going to do is have him go through the hoop, give a reward, go through the hoop, give a reward, go through the hoop, give a reward. And as you do that, you raise the hoop in the water. So you might start out with the hoop really low, and every time you're raising it. And every time he goes through it, he gets a reward. Ultimately, that hoop will be up in the air, and he'll jump up from the water through the hoop and land back down in the water. Every time getting a reward for doing that. And that is what successive approximations are. In the next video, I'll tell you how to do successive approximations and other behavior techniques, for therapy.